past $100 a barrel. But, what does a massive macroeconomic number like that actually mean for you and me? Well, it means that within hours, cargo ships doubled their freight rates. It means the cost of diesel for the trucks delivering goods to your local supermarket spiked instantaneously. Basically, the price of the groceries on your shelf surged before you even made it to the checkout line. So this wasn't just some distant military engagement. It was an instant financial earthquake. It was a sudden, unavoidable tax on human existence that raised the terrifying specter of runaway inflation and a synchronized global recession. To put that into perspective, the International Energy Agency called this the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Just let that sink in for a second. Now, for decades, economists have talked about the severe energy crisis of the 1970s, right? The lines around the block just to buy a gallon of gas, the crippling stagflation, the global panic. But this 2026 disruption, it happened at the speed of modern algorithms, sending immediate shockwaves through our hyper-connected global trade networks. So how on earth did we get to this breaking point so quickly? Section 1. The road to war. Triggers, tensions, and leadership. Okay, so the situation rapidly deteriorated in early 2026. Back in January, deep economic despair and a push for freedom inside Iran boiled over into massive anti-government protests, and the Iranian security apparatus responded with a severely bloody crackdown. Naturally, the international community scrambled for a diplomatic off-ramp. By February, desperate indirect negotiations between the US and Iran kicked off in Oman to try and cap enrichment and de-escalate the whole thing, but those talks completely collapsed. No agreement, the diplomatic window just slammed shut. In response, the US initiated this unprecedented military buildup in the Middle East, massing naval strike groups and air assets at levels we really hadn't seen since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. The entire region essentially became a powder keg, just waiting for a single spark. And behind closed doors, the definitive political moves were being made. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, leaning on a deeply historical relationship and shared strategic alignment, successfully lobbied U.S. President Donald Trump for a joint military intervention. And their strategy was highly specific. They weren't just going after concrete infrastructure or bombing empty runways. No, they intended to target the actual architects of Iran's military strategy. By utilizing deeply embedded Israeli intelligence, these two leaders set the definitive catalyst for action, prioritizing the complete removal of key human decision-makers from the board entirely. Section 2. Operation Epic Fury, the decapitation strike. Okay, let's dive into this. Operation Epic Fury launched on February 28th with terrifying suddenness and overwhelming scale. Night skies lit up across the country as precision munitions literally cut through fortified bunkers, immediately targeting critical military infrastructure and highly sensitive nuclear sites. But what truly set this operation apart from anything in modern warfare were the precision-guided decapitation strikes. This was a synchronized, overwhelming operation explicitly designed to cripple the entire chain of command. Dozens of senior Iranian officials were targeted in the opening moments, literally before they could even pick up a phone to issue a counterorder. Without a doubt, the absolute most monumental event of this initial barrage was the assassination of Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. A lifetime of iron-fisted, unquestioned authority ended in a fraction of a second. This radically and permanently shifted the power dynamics within the country, instantly thrusting his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, into the leadership role. I mean, just imagine the sheer chaos of inheriting the leadership of a fractured nation while your capital city is literally shaking from bunker-buster bombs. The entire geopolitical weight of the Middle East shifted in a single heartbeat. 30. That is the staggering number of top-tier Iranian officials who were eliminated in just the first half minute of the operation. Now, you might be wondering, how do you successfully target 30 highly protected individuals in 30 seconds? Well, it required a groundbreaking technological deception campaign. The US and Israel used cutting-edge AI to flood Iranian radar screens with deep-faked communications and ghost signals, basically blinding their early warning systems completely. Meanwhile, old-school on-the-ground espionage had already planted physical trackers on the targets. By combining the oldest tricks in the spy playbook with next-gen artificial intelligence, Iranian intelligence was totally blindsided at the absolute most crucial moment in their history. Section 3. Regional Retaliation. The Middle East in chaos. Of course, a strike of that magnitude was never going to go unanswered, and Iran hit back rapidly. They launched massive waves of missile and drone strikes right across the region. Put yourself in this scenario. Imagine sitting in the terminal at Dubai International Airport, literally one of the busiest transit hubs on Earth. And suddenly alarms are blaring, airspace is restricted, and panicked crowds are being evacuated as drone debris rains from the sky. Toxic black smoke billowed into the atmosphere as fuel depots in both Tehran and Kuwait erupted into massive flames. The chaos was absolute, and deeply vital civilian and commercial infrastructure found itself entirely paralyzed in the crossfire. Now, geographically speaking, the Middle East has an Achilles heel, the Strait of Hormuz. It's a highly vulnerable 21-mile-wide stretch of water. It is incredibly easy to mine and incredibly dangerous for commercial vessels to navigate under active military fire. By forcefully choking off this single, narrow bottleneck, ship traffic plummeted by 90%, and 20% of the entire global oil supply was instantly disrupted. So this regional military retaliation didn't just hurt the combatants, it put a hard stop to international maritime trade. Section 4. Global economic shock, inflation, shortages, and panic. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the catastrophic financial hemorrhage experienced by neighboring nations. The UN estimated that Arab nations faced a staggering $200 billion in economic losses as capital fiercely fled the region. And to cope with the crisis and the export choke points in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia was forced to cut its oil output by a massive 20%, slashing production down to 8 million barrels per day. When the global energy grid is suddenly starved of that much volume, pure panic takes hold in financial capitals, from London to Tokyo to Wall Street. To truly understand the global reach of this shock, we really have to look beyond the immediate combat zone. Take this official March 2026 report from Turkey's Justice and Development Party, for example. Turkey serves as a perfect microcosm for the crisis. Because they aren't an oil giant, they import their energy, just like most of the world. When this conflict erupted, nations like Turkey had to brace for a devastating chain reaction. Official documents like this reveal a desperate scramble to assess how to just keep the lights on, as factory production lines slowed down and transportation costs literally doubled overnight. This is exactly where the macroeconomic shock deeply impacts everyday life. The cascading effects were synchronized everywhere. As global stock markets plunged and airlines grounded thousands of commercial flights due to closed airspaces, a far more dangerous crisis emerged. The sudden spike in natural gas prices meant that the cost to produce agricultural fertilizer absolutely exploded. If farmers can't afford to fertilize their crops, global yields plummet, and suddenly the world is staring down the very real threat of widespread food shortages and global hunger. Simultaneously, highly dependent Asian economies were forced to declare energy emergencies, rationing diesel and fuel just to keep essential services running. A localized 40-day war caused a synchronized global supply chain collapse. Section 5. The world transformed. Casualties and ceasefires. As the dust began to settle, the stark human toll of the 40-day campaign was heavy and highly asymmetrical. Iranian security and IRGC forces suffered over 4,700 killed. United States troops saw 6 fatalities. Israeli soldiers saw 16. And fundamentally, tragically, thousands of civilians were killed and displaced globally, bearing the devastating brunt of the bombings, the panic, and the massive infrastructure destruction. The vast disparity in these numbers really serves as a somber reflection on the nature of this rapid, heavily technological modern conflict. By April 2026, fragile, imposed ceasefires finally began to take effect across the region. The bombs stopped falling and the hot war paused. But the economic craters, those remain entirely visible today. The geopolitical